record this. So welcome to the DC Buzz. Every month here every month in the digital cinematography degree program, we do what's called the DC Buzz, where we bring in outside individuals to talk to us, outside professionals. And we've done a whole variety of people over the last couple of years, and it's really pretty popular. But it's really with incredible pleasure tonight that I introduce one of my dearest friends, that I've known Gabe since, for 15 years, now. It's pretty interesting. And Gabe started out working with me as an AC and then worked his way up to an assistant camera and then as the DP. And he's also a producer and a director. And if I could tell you to pattern yourself off of anybody that I've ever met, it would be Gabe, because he knows, he's got this down. And he's humble enough that he won't admit that, but he does. Trust me. I worked with a lot of DPs. On an average year, I'll work with 30 or 40 different DPs, and I can easily say that Gabe is probably, if not the best, one of the best that I have worked with on this. And there's a lot of different reasons because of that. But one of the reasons that I asked Gabe to join us tonight, his mom and dad are here, so I'd like to welcome them both. And they're both educators, which I really love as well. I feel like I know you guys because I've heard about you for 15 years from Gabe.
Hi.
So, but
I'm trying to say hi to them, but they're muted.
Yeah. So, Gabe, we can hear you, Deborah. So Gabe is one of those people who, has a lot of skills. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. So, Gabe, you want to give us a little bit of a background of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Not super complicated background. I grew up in Connecticut. I went to the University of Connecticut. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I had a casual interest in television and film throughout my high school experience. I did some, the local cable station internships during high school. Very basic, embarrassing stuff. But, I produced a little talk show about movies with some friends of mine. And then I got to college and I spent my first year just doing gen eds. And I got to the end of my first year of college at the University of Connecticut, and I spent the summer at Career Services, and they told me to be a flight attendant and a mortician and a handful of other things that were just made no sense to me. And I kind of realized, well, this is kind of the only, I guess I could be a lawyer or a doctor, but the thing I'm kind of interested in the most is television and film. And from that point on, I sort of created my own major, which the University of Connecticut allowed us to do. And so that's what I did over the final 3 years of my college experience. And then I got out, and unless you're a sports fanatic and want to go work for ESPN, which I was not, I liked sports, but I wasn't, I didn't have all the stats, which if you want to work for ESPN, you better know everything about every sport. And that wasn't me. So I went to work in retail for a year. I absolutely hated it. And long story short, the summer after about a year after working retail, I met a woman, and I was just wanting to get out of retail, wanting to get out of Connecticut because I knew there was no opportunity for me there. I traveled with her down to Florida where she lived, and within 10 days, I got an internship at a production company in Orlando, Florida called Pink Sneakers Productions. They were behind I Want a Famous Face, which was an MTV show at the time about people wanting to get plastic surgery to look like celebrities. And I dove right in. And so that was my, everybody, as you get into this business, you realize that everybody has a very unique individual story about how they got into the business and how they found their way into this line of work. And so that was mine. And so what did I do? I took VHS tapes, and they had these TV VHS combos. They had a small room with about 10 of them. And all of us interns would take the VHS tapes, we'd pop them in, and these were copied over from what the producers had shot in the field. And we would sit there and we would transcribe every word that was said during the surgeries, the procedures, the interviews, the scenes the producer shot. And that's what I did for 3 months. for no money, 60 hours a week. And that's how I got into the business. So that's a little background about me. You know, I didn't come from big money, anything like that. I knew I wanted to get into the business somehow, some way. And that's what I did to get into it. I found a way, I found an internship, and I worked hard during that internship. And when people gave me the opportunity, I told them what I wanted to do, which was I knew I didn't want to be in an editing suite. And that may be for some of you, and that's totally perfect and great. But I was like, I want to be in the field when things get shot. And so when I had those opportunities to preach that idea, I made that known that I was going to work hard, but I wanted to be out there when content got shot. So back to you, Randy.
And so I met Gabe on a show at Pink Sneakers called Hogan Knows Best. And so did you work on the pilot for that with, you know, Scott and those guys?
I don't think I worked on the pilot. I think I was interning during the pilot, but I remember during my internship, Randy Schaefer, I remember him coming in for an interview with the higher ups at the company. I remember seeing him, not knowing who he was, not knowing what he did. And again, I just remember I worked really hard during my internship, but I was never aggressive about you know, promoting myself or being too, you know, forward about anything. When people would listen to me, I would say, I love this and I want to be in the field. And that was it. You don't want to go overboard. You don't want to, you know, overdo it ever. It's a social skill thing, right? You want to make sure that you're telling the people who are acknowledging your hard work what you want to do, but in a very conscious, subtle way, I guess is the best way I can put it.
Right. And so I was very lucky in that I got to meet Gabe, and there were a couple other people there, Matt and, you know, Travis and those guys, that there was a really good group of people that were all kind of motivated and had the right attitude and were fun and young and willing to learn and stuff. And I co-DP'd that show with another of a really good friend of mine named Randy Schaefer. His last name is Schaefer. My last name is Baker. We're both Randys. They call us Schaefer and Bake. And so we developed this really good crew of, like, you know, these ACs and assistant camera people, you know, and the camera crew. And we had, you know, a really good audio guy and a really good assistant audio guy. And we shot this series. What we do, 3 or 4 seasons of that series. And then there was a spinoff of that with Brooke Knows Best that I ended up leaving after that and going out and doing other shows. But, you know, for 4 years there, when Gabe was starting out, it was like a good core of us. And then, you know, we worked on a whole variety of shows there, you know, all the, you know, in this industry, once you get on a show like that, you can work 3 or 4 seasons. And then you can jump on that particular production company. They went from show to show to show, and then they started having multiple shows going at the same time. Not a great production company, by the way. It was a beginning company. They made a lot of mistakes. But we had a blast, and we were creating some really fun television. And so it was really good. And so we developed this really good team. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that whole lifestyle, Gabe. And so how many reality shows would you estimate you've worked on since then?
50.
50. I would say probably 60 or 75.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not exactly. Well, so when you get into this, when you're in the reality business, the ideal paradigm for making the most amount of money is to get on the longest run shows possible. If you can get on a show that shoots 3 months or 4 months, that's fantastic, right? Because it's much harder to fill your calendar with small shoot, like, oh, we just want you for a week, or we just want you for 2 weeks. Or if you can find ways to get on shows that run for 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, you're more than happy to work less amount of shows, because you're going to be guaranteed more amount of days and spend less time trying to find more work. So you want to get on the long run shows. That's to your financial advantage, to find shows that shoot for longer periods of time.
Yeah. And you know, these shows like Hogan's show, we traveled all over the place. We went to LA, went to Key West, we went, you know, we went all over. And so this is the beginning of the reality business. You know, Real World was out, and you know, Richie, I think, was working on the Osbournes at the time and stuff like that. So this was the beginning. And I kind of thought reality was going to be a fad that was going to go away after a couple of years. Of course, that never happened, and it just took off. But now, today, you know, back then there wasn't really a whole lot of reality television people out there. So you kept getting hired and hired. And so, you know, again, one of the great things about Gabe is that he really, you know, has been entrenched in the reality end of this. And like he said, if you can get on a series that has a long run, you know, we have a friend that just got off a series that did 3 seasons, and they were 3-year-long seasons. You know, I did Gabe, I worked on a show called Dr. K's Exotic Animal ER, where I shot the pilot. I was the DP on the first 4 seasons. I was the supervising producer and director on the last 4 seasons. Gabe came in and DP'd that show. He was a camera operator going into the show. He ended up DPing the show. And so one of the things that I think that, you know, and again, I worked with a lot of, you know, really great DPs. And I think, you know, one of the things that separates Gabe from a lot of those people is that he can edit, but he's also a really good producer and director. You know, he can step in as a DP and produce and direct. And I've seen this in real life a lot of times better than the producer or director that is actually on the set, because he understands it a little bit better. And so let's talk about, you know, what it takes to get to that point, Gabe. You know, and was there a point where you realized, look, you know, I know what's going on, and does that have to do with understanding formatting reality shows? And could you talk a little bit about what I mean when I talk about formatting of a reality show?
Sure. So you know, it's so I started off as an intern, and then a production assistant, and then an assistant camera. And an assistant camera, I had a role that it was very natural to me, which was super type A. Everything's organized. You have your batteries charged here. You have this here. You know exactly which case every reflector is in, or you know exactly. And that suited me really well. And that was like my comfort zone for a long time. And what was not my comfort zone was when I went from this type A way of thinking about being an assistant camera, where you're managing media and it's all about organization and knowing that, to camera work, which is a much different, it's the natural step up in the reality order, but it is also a completely different way about thinking and the art of it, and combining the art of it with actually shooting the content story first. And so this was so I want to be honest with people who are interested in this path. It was a super hard transition for me, because I was very hard on myself, very much a perfectionist. And if you have a perfectionist mentality and you go into reality TV, it's going to take you some time. It's going to be a bit of a struggle, because you know, I've said to Randy on many occasions, and like, on a good day, you know, you make 50 mistakes or things you look back on where you would have had a slightly different shot at a slightly different time. And on a bad day, you make 150 or 300 or 500 or whatever it is. So I was a bad shooter for a long time before I was a good shooter. That's tough. You have to be resilient with that. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to fight through your mistakes, and you have to be willing to not be good at your craft before you have to be willing to be bad at your craft before you get really good at your craft. And it took me a long time. And the answer to Randy's question is really, I just didn't give up. I guess I just didn't give up. I kept shooting, and shooting poorly at times, and shooting at stuff I would watch back now. And one of the big things both the Randys preached to me is watch your footage back. And so that's what I would do, is I would watch my footage back. I would go out, I would be a second camera or maybe a third camera on a segment or a shoot. And I would go back and I would watch with the Randys and I would let them evaluate my work. And I had to accept that it was bad before it could get good. And yeah, that's tough. That can be tough to take, especially because you're getting paid now, right? So someone's paying you, and to hear that your work is not good, or you didn't hold your shots long enough, or you should have known to go ahead and get this cutaway for the editor to use in post, but you didn't. That can be it's humbling, and it's tough to take. And I was super hard on myself. So, but when you keep at it, and you have good mentors, of course, that's huge. It's very important, especially in reality TV, to learn from reality TV shooters who are good shooters, how to shoot a scene and what your responsibilities are as it goes from, say, a 3-camera scene to a 2-camera scene to all of a sudden we have 2 things going on, and these 2 camera guys are going to be over here shooting this, and you're by yourself shooting this. And now you're responsible for your wides, your mediums, your tights, your cutaways, right? So, and the reality of the situation is that the more shooters you have, the less responsibilities you have to give to the editor, right? So it's easier with more shooters, it's harder with less. And you have to think about that. And I'm not an editor. I don't spend any time in the edit bay, but I have learned to think like an editor through all my training, through the Randys, through understanding that it is your responsibility as a reality cam op to give the editor the shots they need to create the scene. And then you're also managing that. And this goes more in line with the producing aspect that Randy's talking about.
Open the door.
Is that you're also responsible for listening to what's happening and knowing when there's something emotional happening in this scene. And now it's my job to think less like an editor and more like a cameraman, where I want to be tighter on this person. This person's starting to cry now. This person's getting emotional, or this person's having a reaction to something this other person just said, and I'm going to punch in to get that reaction. So it's a balance, right? So it's a constant balance between the type A, like I need wides, mediums, tights, but also understanding that like these are people you're shooting too, right? And they're having this experience on the completely other side of the camera. And you have to be in tune with both. You have to be in tune with your coverage of any scene, but you also have to be in tune with what is happening in front of you. And yes, I'd love to get this cutaway now, but guess what? It's overridden by the fact that this person is having an emotional reaction right now. And I need to be focused on that. And I need to be zoomed in on that, or I need to be a little bit tighter, because this person's having a real experience in front of me in my presence. And it, that in itself is part of the art of shooting a reality TV, because when you're so focused on a piece of physical mechanical equipment, you can kind of lose sight of the fact that there are real people doing real things in front of you, having real experiences. And you don't want to do that. You need to be aware of the fact that they're on camera. Like many of us don't like to be on camera. We turned off by it, or feel like it's invading our privacy or our space, and they're subjecting themselves to it. And so it's a balance. And so, yeah, I guess the main thing I want to say about all that is you will be bad before you're good. And that's part of the process.
So let me just touch on some of those things, because, if for most of the people who are in here have had me as an instructor, and they know one of the first things I tell them right off the bat is you're going to make mistakes. You got to give yourself permission to make mistakes. That goes with the whole thing. And so it's like anything else. If you're learning how to play a new sport or musical instrument or learning a foreign language, guess what? You're going to suck at it at first, and you're going to suck at this at first. The key is not giving up. The key is, it's knowledge, practice, and, 50% knowledge, 45% practice, 5% natural ability. The first time somebody told me that, I was like, yeah, I don't believe in that. But, I'm a firm believer of that. And then a couple other things you said that really is important is, I think you got to have a job that you hate to really, appreciate a job that you love every day. If you haven't worked in a job that you hate, then you don't really understand how nice it is to have a job where you wake up every day and go, okay, what cool thing do I get to do today? What cool person do I get to meet? What cool place do I get to go? What cool thing do I get to learn how to do? Because it's a learning experience. They say that if you do a
Mr.
documentary
Baker,
film, yes, Deborah.
did you see what I dropped in the chat?
No, I don't. So let's go through this, Deborah, without interrupting. And so, that's one of the big things is, and then the other thing you said was mentors. As bad as Pink Sneakers was as a production company, and they were really nice people, and we had fun, and it was a great job. The best thing about them is that they understood the power of training people and bringing people up through the thing. So they allowed us to really put together like a training school almost, where we, had documents about how to shoot reality television and little things that you don't know. It's like you were talking about where, you have to understand, first of all, you have to know how to operate a camera and how to shoot a camera. So you're worried about exposure and focus and white balance and all that stuff as a camera person, all the technical stuff. But at the same time, you got to stay keenly attuned to the story that's going on in front of you and the story that's happening. So having good mentors to help you do that. I remember us practicing how to do handoffs from cars, if somebody gets out of the car. And so there's also a whole communication aspect of that. I mean, we used to do hand signals, I still do hand signals with other camera guys where I go in and I train them. Yeah, I'm going to hold up two fingers. That means I got a two shot. I'm going to hold up a single. That means a single. I've got a wide shot, So if you work on a reality crew and you see people who've worked together, you'll see that happening. It's all seamless communication that you don't hear. And if you don't realize what's going on, you'd miss that, but it's happening constantly. So there's a lot happening that you need to pay attention to. And it's not just Gabe. I would come home after shooting a series and go, they're going to fire me. I'm going to get fired because I was horrible today.
Yeah.
It's like
you're going to have bad days. You're going to have days where you're just like, I sucked today. I made 30 wrong decisions that you're going to have days like that.
And I show a video in my class by Ira Glass from NPR, called The Gap. And it was something he wrote about writing. And in it, he talks about how when you first start out, you got this incredible taste, what looks good, what it should look like, but what it should look like and what you're producing doesn't quite match up. And that's called the gap. And the only way to narrow that gap is just to do a body of work, continue to do a body of work. So we talk about that a lot. So was there a point, Gabe, like I said, I didn't work with you for about a year, and then you came back, and I remember watching you shoot and going, my God, this guy has improved so much. And I can remember you doing an artistic shot down the row of something and thinking, that's a beautiful shot, was there a point where it kind of clicked for you?
There was a point where it kind of clicked, but I don't know that I can say exactly when it happened, but I just kept doing it. I just kept listening and learning. And but I do think for your students, a big part of it is to understand what I was so insecure about when I first started shooting was approaching the job through the perspective of an editor and understanding that what your job is to do is to give the editor for example, this is the difference between a feature film. Like a feature film is you have a script, right? And the director has a vision, and it's kind of most of the time like a sole vision, and he knows he's going to get his coverage, but he in general kind of knows when he wants his. But when you shoot a reality scene, you could shoot a couple of people who you would never associate with in real life for an hour at a place you would never go in real life. And you have no clue what the producers back in post-production or the executive producer or the owner of the company are going to want that scene to be about. Your producer in the field with you might have an idea of what he thinks it should be, he or she thinks it should be about. And then it gets overridden by someone later on down the line, right? So your job is to always kind of be thinking like an editor. So anytime the people move positions, right? You want to reestablish a wide. You want to make sure you have a wide that has them in their new positions. And because you don't know. You don't have any idea what 1.5 minutes of the 60 minutes you shoot of these people talking is ever going to be used. You just don't. As you get better at it, you're going to have a pretty good idea what's not going to be used, right? And so that's important to know too, because when these people are talking about something that you know is not going to be used, say like say one of your 3 cast members brings up, oh, I have this long story from 3 years ago, right? This is your opportunity to get those cutaways of what they're doing in the particular scene, their hands, their feet, their food, whatever it is. And so there's no such thing as a reality shooter who isn't also a producer, who isn't also thinking, a good reality shooter, I say, as a producer too, who's also thinking like, well, I know this is never going to make it. Because the minute you know something's never going to make it, then you probably shouldn't be shooting their face talking about it, because it's never going to make it, right? We know it's never going to make it. Now's your opportunity to get those cutaways of things an editor might actually use to cut the scene when they get back. And you don't know when maybe the thing that they're going to talk about 10 minutes from now is the thing that they're going to use in the scene. And if you're, a good producer in the field with you, will let you know ahead of time, hey, this is what we want, hopefully, the scene to be about, right? So when they go off on a tangent that has nothing to do with it, that's your opportunity to go ahead and get your cutaways and all the other shots that an editor is going to want later on, because he may not have the beginning of the sentence that he really wanted. So you're going to need that shot of their hands pulling up a drink or a piece of food to help you out, to cover your butt if the other cam ops you're shooting with weren't right on their face at the top of the sentence where the story really got cooking. And so you have to think like an editor. But then you, like Randy said, you also have to be dialed into the story at all times. And you have to, I think, and I think Randy would agree, you shoot with your ears. Like the goal is to become where the camera becomes an extension of your hands and your mind, where you're operating it without having to think too much about it. Like what is a zoom in and what is a zoom out. You're turning the dial, how to rack your focus and iris without having to think about it first. That's the ideal. But what's dictating the shots that you're getting is what you're hearing. That's the key, is you're listening. And so, I've worked with so many reality camera operators who don't even listen to the audio they're being fed. And that to me is one of the biggest red flags you can have, is if you're not listening intently to what the people are saying, then you're not really a reality TV shooter. You're someone who knows how to operate a camera maybe, but a reality shooter is deeply dialed into what people are saying. And the minute they hear them go from that story that means nothing to those comments that mean everything, that are super important to cut in a scene that might have an emotional impact on the audience, then you're right back out. You snap zoom back out from that tight shot of hands or a glass of wine or whatever it is, and you're right back into that tight single of that person who's finally saying that content that is going to make it to the final cut. And so, yeah, I shoot with my ears. My most important thing on any show I do is to have good, crisp, clean audio of the people I'm shooting, because without that, I have nothing. How am I supposed to know I need that. So, yeah.
I wish I had behind the scenes footage, and because, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is there are different types of reality shows. There's reality shows where it's more, set up, where you go, okay, this is how we're going to start. This is how we're going to end. Go. Okay, here's the scene. Everybody's got their, position, and everybody's got their assignment that they're going to be covering, who's they're going to be covering. And you seamlessly know that you're going to go from you're watching other camera people, you're paying attention to the story. You're going from a, wide shot to a 2-shot to a single shot to over the shoulder shot. But then there's other shows, you know, that we've worked on where it's like all of a sudden somebody comes in with an animal who's dying, and you've got them going in on the table trying to save the animal, and you've got 3 cameras around them shooting it, and you got to know where you need to be, and you got to pay attention, you got to stay out of the way of the people so that you don't cause the animal to die, and then you got to be able to follow them. And I mean, it's a dance. It's like a dance, and most people, when they see that for the first time, they're like, holy crap, I had no idea how intense that was.
So what, you know, just in response to that, the one thing I would say is that even on those shows, and there are those shows which are much more produced, right? They're much more, oh, you're here, you're here. It's like, you want to make sure that you always need to know that there are real people you're shooting, and you never know what's going to happen. You never know when Will Smith is going to go slap Chris Rock in the face. You know what I mean? Like, these things, even on the most produced shows, the most very formulaic shows, like, you need to be ready to call an audible, right? You need to be ready to abandon what coverage said producer told you that you're on, because what if someone does something out of the blue and they walk, and I'm shooting this way, and they walk past my right shoulder. And now if the person who's shooting them is trying to still shoot them, guess who they're shooting? They're shooting me. Now it's my responsibility to abandon the coverage that I had on the other person who's doing nothing of any relevance. And I've got to go and turn to show the person who's doing the crazy thing, right? And that's, you know, you need to know that. You need to have that feel for, hey, the coverage is shit. The coverage is shot. Like, it's gone. What we were supposed to do, like, you want to go in with a plan, but in reality, it's just a plan. That's all it is. It's a best case scenario, right? But these people, the people you're shooting often don't understand, hey, I'm supposed to keep my face open to this person's camera or that person's camera. They don't know. They're not actors. They don't know about hitting marks, right? So you need to be prepared for when that person decides they're going to walk right by you, and you're going to be the only camera who can get them, because if the other cameras try to shoot them, they're going to see me, and that no one wants to see me. So that's a big part of it too, is every reality show is different. Just like Randy was saying, there's very produced formulaic shows where, you know, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't know how to react under those circumstances, because it's, in some sense, it's all happening live. These are real people in front of you that you don't know. You can assume where they're going to be, but you don't always know that they're going to play by those rules. And, you know, that's a big part of being a reality operator, is you go with it. You think about it as like, we're going to shoot it live. Like, you know, when I'm a DP on a scene, I say, hey, this is what I'm thinking to my B cam or my C cam, or both my B and my C cam. I say, this is what we hope happens, right? But what we hope happens doesn't happen more than 50% of the time, right? The other 50% of the time, I'll tell my other operators, like, hey, if they do this or this, then I'll go this way, you'll go that way, you come with me, or I'll call out over the walkie. I'll say, you join me, you shoot that single cam, and now you're off on your own. And so you have to know how to go from shooting single cam, getting all the coverage you need just by yourself, to shooting 3 cams. And so it's a lot. There's a lot going on, and story is always first.
And that's just part of it. I mean, just the reality part is part of it. Then you got B-roll, and then you got sit down interviews or sit and lits, and there are different ways of doing interviews. You know, you can sit somebody down and do the interview. You can have them actually doing something while you're talking to them doing interview. So there are different styles, and each show has its own format and its own style. And you got to figure that out. And just doing B-roll coverage of what you're going to need to cover through, and understanding how transitions happen in the shows and stuff. So there's a lot that you need to know to shoot reality. And there's really not a whole lot of books out there on how to do that, or there's not a lot of training on how to do that. It's just really going out there and getting to do that. If you want to get a good example of how to figure out what that's like, just take your camera and go out and try to do a complete coverage of somebody doing something simple with a single camera, and see how well you cover that, you know, and see how hard it is. You know, like I said, it's easy with 3 cameras. 1 camera, it becomes a lot more difficult.
Right. Well, it's a fantastic exercise, and I recommend that exercise for anybody because, you know, when you're shooting single camera, what you want to be thinking about is what shots would I be getting if I had two other people here? If I had a guy on my left and then another guy, another 10 feet on my left, what shots would I be getting? But I don't have those guys right now. So I need to get my shots that are important. I need to get those shots that are also important, but I also need to be intimately involved with what is happening right now, because yes, you want to get those other shots, but not at the expense of missing the tight shot when the important moment happens. And that's why I always say you're shooting with your ears, you're listening to what the talent is talking about, is going through, because you don't want to go back for a massive wide, what we would in the business would call a non-sync wide, where you can't see lip flap, you can't see what they're saying. You do not want to walk 20 feet away from them, get your big non-sync wide, which you've told yourself you need for your editor, which is ideal, right when they have the emotional breakdown, right when they spill their guts out to their significant other or their parents. You know, you would rather sacrifice that one shot to be there for the close-up as they bare their soul. And so that's you know, that's a big part of it, is learning like, hey, this is a moment that they're saying something that I don't think is relevant. This is the moment I'm going to walk away and get my big wide, my big non-sync wide that an editor can pop in anywhere to create a cut point, right? But that only works if you're also very dialed into the story and know, hey, this is my opportune moment to go get that shot that editor needs. And that's comes with, again, because that's time, experience, screwing it up, and then coming back and, you know, getting better at it and better at it and better at it, and learning and listening, like really listening to me is the big thing, is you're always listening.
So I just want to follow up on one more thing before we move on to another subject here. And that is that, you know, when you work with people and crew like that for long periods of time, especially the talent and the crew that you're working with, they become like family. You know, I love Gabe like a brother. You know, I consider Gabe my family now, you know, because, and we can go for a year or two without seeing each other, and when we meet, it's like we started up from where we left off again. It's that kind of a bond that you have. And still, you know, I worked on every redneck show there was, I worked on every swamp show there was, I worked on wrestling shows, you know, with all these people. I still keep in touch with almost all those people, you know, because you develop this relationship with them. It's almost like being in a war or in a battle with them. You survive this kind of experience. So that's it. But let's talk a little bit about a gear. Now, for you, was it hard when you made the transition where you're going out on other shows? Like I tell people all the time, people say, when you go out on a new show, I'm so nervous when I start a show. Are you still nervous? I'm like, I'm nervous on every show. But as soon as I get on the set and start shooting, those nerves go away, because I know kind of what I'm doing, you know, but that's it. But what about learning new equipment? Because almost every shoot you're on, you're shooting with a different camera or a series of cameras. Was that tough for you to make that transition?
So listen, to me, it's all about, right, preparation. So, you know, anytime I go on, say I go onto a new show hires me, because I consider myself a cameraman. And once you learn the essentials of camera work, focus, iris, framing, right, then it's an imperative that you believe that you can do that with any camera you're given, right? And you can. That's the true answer to that question, is no matter what camera they give you, you can do all those things. Now, if you're going to go onto a new shoot with a camera you've never used before, people have different perspectives. My perspective is like, I sell myself as a camera operator. I'm like, I can operate any camera you give me. But if it's something I haven't worked before, I'm either going to make sure I get there a day early, I get the camera, I spend like an intimate amount of time setting it up with my own shoulder rig, my own gear, my own whatever it is. And then I learn the menu systems to a T. I set my shortcuts to the, you know, because they are different. And sometimes the zooms are different, right? Sometimes the zooms clockwise zooms in, clockwise zooms out. You don't know. So, and that in itself can be a mime. So,
Parfocal versus varifocal lens.
right, all of that. So, my thing is just if it's with a camera I haven't shot before, I'm never afraid to tell people, hey, listen, I'm a camera guy. I can shoot any camera you give me, but I will make sure that I allot myself, hey, I'm going to come in a day early, or you're flying me in. I'd like to get the camera the night before, and I will spend as much time as I need going through like every menu system, because in the heat of battle, you want to make sure that you can make the adjustments you need to make on the fly. You want to make sure you understand how the lens works, how it sits in the camera, how it's going to balance on your body. All those things are important, to do.
So let's talk about gear then, because you mentioned something about you have a lot of your own. You have your own shoulder mount, you have your own earplug, you wear a vest with the walkie-talkie vest on the front and stuff. You have specific gear that you like. You have a specific belt that you like to wear. Can you talk about some of that stuff and how you came about acquiring that? And do you think shooters need to have that stuff?
So, listen. Like, there are very few shoots that I personally go on. So I just spent 8 days on the road. The last 4 were with a company called Sharp Entertainment doing a show called Love During Lockup. I'd never worked on it before. I didn't know the DP. I was just the B cam. I was the B cam and the drone operator for that show. This is all I've done for 15 years now is reality TV. It's all I do. I don't do features. I don't do narrative. That's just what I do. I have the gear that I love, the gear that I take with me on every shoot. I have my own shoulder mount. I have my own small HD ultra bright monitor. I have my own support mechanism for the camera. And there's rarely a shoot that I go on that there's not another camera operator on that shoot who is like, what is that? Can I try that out? I want to see that. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I haven't been using that for the last 5 years. That would save my back so much. Like, that would make my life so much easier. I know a lot of camera operators who own a ton of gear and rent it because they've develop relationships with companies that don't own their own gear. That has never been my situation, right? So, and that's something that you will learn as you get into the industry is, do I want to own a ton of cameras and have to maintain them and have to upkeep them and all that? I don't. I own specialized stuff. I own all the stuff that I want for a handheld camera rig, which is to say my own shoulder mount, my own support rod pod, my own small HG monitor, stuff that I have customized exactly the way I want. So on any given show, they give me the camera. And if I talk to the assistant camera beforehand, I'll say, hey, don't add any of your stuff on it. I'm good. I'm bringing my stuff because that's the stuff I want every single shoot. It's the stuff I know. It's the stuff I'm going to set up and have it perfect just the way I want it. I want my rig to be clean and look good and feel good and operate exactly as I want it. And then I have my specialized stuff, which is like my drone. And so that's like, for example, for any of you who are looking to get into the reality TV business, I mean, get your drone license. You don't even need to buy a drone, to be honest with you. Like, at this day and age, production companies don't want to hire a separate drone operator just for the drone. If you can spend the little bit of time it takes to take a drone course, pass it, you can rent the drone yourself or they'll rent the drone for you. The fact that you have that certification, you're Part 107 certified, that is a huge selling point because you're also a camera operator, but you're going to be their drone operator too. They don't have to hire a whole nother person to come in. So I buy specialized stuff. I buy stuff I want to increase production quality. What I don't buy is the FS7s, the cameras, the $10,000 cameras, because all the production companies I work for provide those. So there's no incentive. Now, should I come across a production company that wants to rent that? I would consider investing in it for sure. But I don't want anybody out there to feel like, oh, I have to have all these things in my my gear list to get sold. No, get good at your craft first. You know, if those opportunities present themselves, take advantage for sure. But those are not cheap costs. They're not, you know, I'd rather you invest in lenses or a drone or, you know, more specialized equipment that you can bring with you and sell on a case-by-case basis that production companies might not have, than necessarily buying a fleet of cameras, because that's not cheap. So
How important is it to be a good still photographer? You shoot a lot of still photography as well.
I mean, I think it's important to be a good still photographer just for yourself, but not necessarily for the job. I mean, not for the jobs I do. It's a good skill to have in your back pocket, and it'll help you learn how to use your smaller body non-video cameras. And you should know how to use those too, how to use your A7Ss, your A7Rs, you should know how to use those cameras, just like you should know how to use any camera that you come in contact with. But if I'm speaking from my personal experience, I want to know that skill just for my own personal pictures, but not as a selling point to what I do, because what I do is shoot video, personally. So, you know, that's kind of up to you, and there's not, you know, it's all good to learn, right? But, some of those skills might translate from shooting stills to video, but they're very different, just like reality and features are very different things. Shooting stills and shooting video are very different things too. You know, there's a lot I don't know about shooting still photography, and that's fine. You know, I'm not experienced like using a flash necessarily, but if you give me an A7S or an A7R out in the field, I can take you quality stills, because I have gone through the menu systems and I've learned, oh, I can choose autofocus continuous or autofocus spot center, and this is what I need for this specific instance, because this is what I'm trying to shoot. And those are all worth knowing. Those will never not hurt your skill set.
Here's a couple of questions I want to throw out to you. You know, Darian, I was asking, how long does it take you to get to the point of silent synchronized communication?
Well, so that's a great question. Silent synchronized communication is really only going to come with people who you have shot with personally a lot. So for example, this last shoot where I'm shooting with a brand new DP, this is in the last 5 days. This is someone I've never shot before with. There is no silent synchronized communication. That is non-silent communication. That's either me saying, hey, I've got, so I'm big on the walkie personally. I'll be like, hey, I've got this, I've got this, I've got a single of this person, I've got a wide shot. Silent synchronized communication is going to come in time with people who you shoot with a lot on consecutive projects. And you will get to that point with people who you shoot with a lot, and you're not going to need to talk to them anymore, because they're going to see you, you're going to see them, they're going to know what you're getting. You have trust in them that they know their job, their coverage responsibilities. In that moment, their person's talking, you know, they're on a single. So, you know, you're either going to have a single reaction of what the person they're talking to is listening to, or you're going to have a wide shot, or you'll step back for an ultra wide shot. But silent synchronized communication is, you know, a special thing, and it comes with time and hours spent filming with people who also get the dance and also get the art. And it's something to be treasured, really, at the end of the day, because it's not going to happen. You're going to go into shoots all the time with people who you've never met before, who you have no idea if they're even good at shooting reality. And so when you get to that point where it's silent synchronized, that's like the most zen, peaceful moment you have, because there's that inherent trust that this person knows their job just as well as I know mine. And when whatever happens in front of us, and we don't know what's going to happen, because we don't know what these people are going to say or do, or when they're going to, you know, decide to jump off the cliff, we got it. We got it. We know that it's my job to turn it, you know, so it's a beautiful thing. And it's something to be enjoyed when you get to that point.
I have to say this about Gabe and I. We started early enough in the industry where we were building a lot of our own rigs when we first started out. I mean, if you look at my first rigs and stuff, they were like, Franken, Franken rigs, that's what we called them. And we developed these rod systems that we got, and it was like, made it really easy to shoot for, because what you don't understand is some of the shows you have your shoulder, it's called having the camera on your shoulder, you're shouldered up, you may be shouldered up, out of a 10 to 12 hour day, you may have the camera on your shoulder 7-8 hours during that day. That's a long time to have a camera on your shoulder. So if you don't have the right gear to do that, it becomes a backbreaker. So a couple other questions here for you, Gabe. Can you speak on how you know when to change your type while shooting, shot type while you're shooting reality television? And this was a big thing a lot of people starting out don't know, and that I can answer a little bit of that for him. And that's, number one, using your ear to pay attention to the story. People give you visual cues and verbal cues when they're about to change things, and so you get attuned to listening to how the tone and the pattern of speaking that people do, or their body language. You kind of look at that and know when to do that. I've asked that question of many DPs. When do you know when to change a shot? And I've heard all kinds of questions. You hold a shot for 15 seconds and then move on. You hold a shot for 5. It really just depends really on what's going on and what's happening, and listening to that.
Yeah.
Story in the
Yeah. So I personally, I don't think you ever want to be that.
You can't put a time on it.
There isn't that can't be. You don't want to be thinking like that. You have, if you're thinking like, oh, I need to hold this shot, I need to hold every no, then that means you're thinking less about what's happening in front of you and more about how long I'm supposed to hold a shot. And that means you're less dialed into story than you should be, right? So there are no hard and fast rules, but there's a couple things that are worthy of thinking about, which is, one is like the difference between changing your shot when someone is doing an action but not speaking, and someone is speaking, right? So for example, say someone is just, this is a common thing on like a lot of build shows, someone's welding, right? And they start off with the welding tool and the sparks are going everywhere. So in my mind, right, I can see it, I know they're welding this, maybe let's say it's a foot-long piece of material, right? I know they're going to be welding. So they start off the welding. Now I'm going to hold that nice medium shot I have where I see their face, I see the metal they're welding, and I see the welder, and I'm going to hold that for at least 3 to 5 seconds, right? Because I can see the size of the piece that they're working on. I know that I'm going to have time to punch in and get the tighter shot of the sparks flying off the metal and the metal heating up, right? So when actions without speaking are a great time to be changing your shot angles, because an editor is going to be able to edit between those two shots seamlessly, right? Whereas speaking is very different. Say all of a sudden the welder finishes his welding and now he's talking to someone else about what he just welded. Now, say he turns, he speaks, he's talking to someone else. I have him in a wide shot with him as welding materials, but now he's starting to say something important, right? There's 2 options I have. I can try to do an on-camera move, right? Which is really, in reality, it's never a slow zoom in, it's just a usable zoom in to him. Or I can wait for a pause in his speech where maybe he finishes a sentence. So again, it's all about listening. And then he's going to finish that sentence. I'm going to punch into a single. So now I'm ready for him if he's going to have more important information to talk to this other person about. I've got a nice single shot, and my producer who's watching what I'm doing the entire time isn't like, I want a single of that. Give me a single of that. So again, it's all happening in the moment. It's all based on what the story of what's happening and how important is information. And, but actions, when things are moving, is usually a great time. You want to punch in during that movement so that the editor has both a wide shot of what they're doing and that tight shot to cut between. The audience is never going to know, right? Whereas talking, you kind of either want to make it a usable move, or you want to wait for them to finish a thought and then you punch into a tighter shot, or you punch out from your tighter shot to a wider shot, because maybe the person they're talking to is going to about to have a big reaction to what they just said. So again, story dictates everything that you're shooting almost all the time. But I don't believe in hard and fast rules about changing your shot at all. You definitely, and this is one of the things I learned early on in my career through Randy, was that, you know, he went back and looked at some of my footage, and this is, I'm sure Randy's probably already told you, this is a very common mistake for, you know, up and coming shooters, is you're zooming too much. And even to this day, I can say that your sense of time is distorted when you're shooting on a camera. You might think you've held a shot for 3 seconds and it's been 1 or 1.5. So, you know, in my mind, I'm always sort of doing a 5 count, right? Because I know in my mind that a 5 count probably means I held the shot for 3 seconds, and 3 seconds is kind of the minimum a good editor needs for you to hold a shot. So, you know, to this day, and this, especially when a lot is going on, when a scene is super dynamic, when people are yelling and screaming, what's going on, you think you're holding your shots longer, but you're caught up in the emotion of what's going on because all of a sudden a fight broke out, and you have to train yourself to breathe and hold that shot longer than I think I needed to, because my sense of time is also distorted in this moment because I'm wanting to do a really good job and capture everything. But if you're just giving an editor a bunch of 1-second shots, guess what? You're not doing your job right. Like, you're not giving them what they need to tell the story properly down the line. And so that's tricky, and it's a challenge. And to this day, and I'm sure Randy can, you know, I'm sure he understands that too, is it's your time, your sense of time is distorted when you're in these moments, and it can be very distorted when you're in high energy moments where a lot is going on, or, you know, it's only 2 cameras covering 10 people, and all of a sudden you feel like you have so much responsibility to the editor that instead of just pacing yourself and being willing to miss someone saying something, it's better to have a good shot that the editor can use for 3 to 4 seconds than ping-ponging back and forth trying to catch everything on your own and giving the editor nothing they can use. And that's part of the learning process too. And you're going to be in those positions where you're going to look back at your footage, you're going to be like, oh, I should have just ignored what that person said over there just to make sure I get my editor a good shot of this person here. And that's part of it.
Yeah, you know, there's that old saying about, you know, write, shoot, edit, repeat. You know, for me, it's always been about write, shoot, edit, analyze your work, and then repeat. If you're not looking at your work and figuring out what you did right and what you did wrong, you know, that's an important part of that. I have a question by Jorge, who's talking about regarding focus. I've been shooting reality mostly, and the most tough part is focusing fast when things are moving. How do you do that? You want to give a shot to that? I know I can give the Schaefer example, for example. So Jorge, do you know how far away that you normally stand from a person when you're shooting them? Any idea? It's about 6 feet usually. So you got to know where 6 feet is on the lens, and, you know, on your lens. And we have a friend, Randy Schaefer, who he used to put a piece of tape around it, and then at 6 feet on the very top of the lens, he'd put a little bump. So anytime he felt that bump on the top of the lens, he knew he was 6 feet away without looking at the lens, or even without. But it's an innate kind of thing that you get a habit of. You just kind of know. You know, the tough part is, like, some lenses you go up to focus, you know, closer, and some lenses you go down to focus closer. So you got to get used to that, and then it becomes a natural kind of feeling thing. It's tough. It's tough.
So yeah. So you know, I think what, Jorge, to address your question, well, for one, is focus important? Yes, but for reality TV, probably not as important as you think. The key is to get to sharp focus. It's not, don't be so hard on yourself if you don't get there as quick as you think you should be. and then now you're being too hard on yourself. The goal is to get to critical focus, right? Now, one of the things I learned many years ago, and I did this from observation. This was before I was a camera operator. When I watched shooters, as one thing I would notice is that they would intentionally take themselves out of focus so that they could snap back and really see. And I'm sorry, Brandy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming most of your students know about the peaking feature on camera viewfinders. If not, I'll let you talk to that. But yeah, a really good way to make sure you're in sharp critical focus is to put yourself out of it really briefly, go away from it so that you can come back and see your peaking pop in the eyes or someone's gray hairs or the hair, the things that really make that peaking pop. Is don't be afraid of doing that, because it's reality. If a director wanted everything in sharp critical focus all the time, you'd be working on feature films. You're not. You're working in reality. It's okay to find focus, as you say, pan from someone who's 6 feet from you to someone who's entering a scene 20 feet from you. No one's expecting you to nail that exactly perfectly. I blow it all the time. But guess what? I find it. And I find it either because I'm watching my peaking, with eagle eyes, but also because if I know I don't have it, I'll take it out of focus and then come back and hit it, right? And then you're moving with it. Then once you hit it, you start to move with it. And again, just don't be so hard. Don't be too hard on yourself, because every lens is different, right? A long lens is different than a wide lens. They all have different like percentages of what part of the lens is doing. A very wide lens will have, 1 inch to 1 foot will be 3/4 of the lens, and 1 foot to infinity will be the other quarter. Every lens is different. So, right. And a long lens will be the opposite of that. So it's just about knowing how to, understand the difference between how does a wide angle lens react? Like a wide angle lens is the majority of the focus is going to be in the very closest to the lens areas, and a long lens is going to be the exact opposite, right? So you'll learn that over time, but again, you play with it, and you that's something you can do on your own. You can say, hey, I want you to walk toward, I'm going to put these 2 lenses on. I want you to walk from 40 feet away right up to the camera. And then I'm going to practice that. And then I'm going to change the lenses to a completely different style lens and have you do the exact same thing. Right. And you're only going to get better at it.
Yeah.
But don't be hard on yourself. The biggest thing is learn how to oh, I don't have critical focus. Let's figure out where I'm at. Am I too close? Am I too far? And then you just spin it the other way till you see that peaking pop. Right. And then you're in the zone, and now you can kind of stick with it more.
Once you get used to the lens, you need to know if you're going to move the lens up and go farther away in focus, or move the lens up and go closer. Sure. You need to know that. But Gabe and I have both worked on shows where we've really tried to get in focus as quickly as possible and stuff. But when we watch the editors choose to take the out of focus shot, and so it's going into focus.
Don't worry about it too much,
because it makes the show feel more dynamic.
Half these shows, they like it out of focus anyway. So don't beat yourself up over it. I mean, keep learning, but seriously, I mean, this is reality.
Reality.
Yeah. Half the time, it feels more real if it's not in sharp focus. There's so many things you can do as you shoot a reality show to make it feel more real. And one of them is, step back as far as you can and shoot zoomed in more on your lens. It makes it feel more voyeuristic and more like you're seeing something that's actually happening, as to where a film is all completely planned out. The shots are planned. The more you can maybe give it a little foreground, more like you're watching someone in a park from 50 yards away, that tends to feel more real. Out of focus tends to feel more real, because if you knew where they were going to be exactly in the moment you were going to shoot them, you'd be in focus, right? So again, I don't want to say every show is different. Every show has a style, but you're going to come in contact with a lot of companies who don't want you to most companies don't want you to anticipate the things that are happening in front of you with your cast. They want you to react, because anticipation feels like, oh, I knew this person was about to come around the corner and say this thing they just said. Whereas reaction feels like, oh, I'm just a camera guy in this room. This person came around the corner and I quick panned over to see what they were going to say, because I didn't know they were coming, because this is reality. So, that's part of it.
Different feelings. Yeah. Learn how to use your focus mag as well. That's a good tip on that. But don't get caught up into it. Deborah was asking about changing camera angles, and is it okay to change camera angles in reality? Yeah, you have to think in terms of shot sequencing. And again, it goes back to depending on how many cameras you have, whether you're doing single camera or multi-camera. If you're a multi-camera, everybody has their their coverage that they're doing. You're doing cross coverage with usually, somebody in the middle giving you the wide shot. You always want wide and close-ups and mediums, and you just get into a flow of changing it. Remember the 30-20 rule: change your camera angle by 30 degrees, 30 degrees changing your camera angle and 20 degrees on your focal length, and that helps it cut a little bit better. I have another question. Could you put a link? We talked about links of where to get the specialized equipment, but it's like Film Tools and B&H and Adorama, and those are the main places that you want to go to. Is the Sony FX6 the preferred camera for reality shows? Well, not right now, but it's primarily the FX7 and FX9 are the two big ones. But I use all kinds of cameras, the Canons,
I would say, just from my experience, I'd say the FS7 has been the workhorse for about the last 7-8 years. The fact that that camera is still one of the most predominant cameras used on most reality shows. The FX9 is the upgraded with the dual ISO. Some companies have invested in that, but again, I just shot 4 days on Love During Lockup. They're using the FS7s. The FS7 has been the workhorse of reality, especially from an ergonomic, yes, there are companies still using the Canon C300s and stuff. Guess what? It's just not I mean, perhaps the picture's a little nicer. It's not a good ergonomic camera for reality. It's not a good camera for, where you want the buttons to be, and making it a logistically smart camera to use. The FS7 is still the king, in my opinion. And eventually I think the FX9 will replace that. But if you're a reality production company, you're not going to throw out your FS7s until a network tells you can't use them anymore. So there's no reason for them to get rid of them, really, at this point.
Yeah, it's really the number one prop camera. I just shot for the last 2 days with one with Canon 70 to 200 millimeter lenses on one camera and a Canon 400 to 600 millimeter lens on the other. So on the 600 to 400 millimeter lens, if you breathed on the camera, it shook.
Yeah.
I was doing on a dolly on a tripod with the 70 to 200, which is not a parfocal lens. It's a varifocal lens, which means that you got to set your focus based on your focal length. You can't zoom in and set your focus and zoom out like a par. So it was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. And then halfway through a 2.5 hour session, live session, the intercom cut out on me. So I was on my own, and I went up to the director afterwards and said, I wasn't trying to ignore you. I hope it was okay, but I lost my intercom. He said, that's the best work you've ever done. It's just paying attention and knowing. So that's what it is. So a couple other questions here. How do you learn how not to be hard on yourself?
Yeah, I'm just so you know, Randy, I've got the chat up too, and I want to make sure I get to everybody's questions on here, and I will stick around and make sure I do. But I just fought through it. I don't know that I did. I don't know that I am not hard on myself to this day. What's changed is my confidence in the work that I do. What's changed is that if you persevere, if you be willing to fail, and like Randy said, a huge part of it is you got to watch back your stuff, man. It is the most painful thing you can go through at first, because you watch it back with people who have been doing it for years, and you're embarrassed, and it hurts, and you can't believe that someone's even paying you to show up and shoot for them when you watch it back. the biggest disservice you can do for yourself is not watching your footage back from the get-go as soon as possible. And if you have time to try to edit it, I honestly really didn't very often, but if you have time to, even if you just say you have a couple weeks off, it's the beginning of your career, right? Just go try to shoot a segment on something. It could be a sports, whatever it is. Just get yourself your wides, your mediums, tights, learn how to see how those cut together, or learn like, oh, why does this cut not work and this cut does? And I'm still not good about being not hard on myself, but I'm so much less hard on myself because I'm so much more assured and confident in the work that I do. And so I think that's the best way I can put it. For you, it's not easy for a type A person to do this job, because like I said, even on a good day, you're going to question 20 decisions you made or 50 decisions you made. And that's on a good day, right? So it's not easy.
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations about that, Gabe and I. When Gabe first started out, he was harder on himself than anybody I've ever met, I think, and it was hard for him. And, but he was one of the better people out there doing this, And so for me, I looked at him and thought, wow, this guy is really just super passionate and really wanting to know this stuff and really doing this stuff. But you got to give yourself a break. You're going to make mistakes. And that's what Yoda says it best: failure, the best teacher is. You kind of hard to believe that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Tax season is coming up, and for me, one of the big things, if you're starting out as a freelancer, you just got to know you're going to freak out for 2 years about where the next paycheck is going to come from. You're going to have a string of jobs that you're going to do back to back to back, and then it's all of a sudden it's going to dry up and you're not going to have any jobs. The hard part is not to freak out all the time, to learn how to enjoy that time off, which I'm not sure I've ever learned how to do, to be honest with you. I still freak out about, okay, where's the next job coming from? But that's all it's about. You have to be careful about your taxes. I can't tell you how many freelancers started out in their first year. They did their taxes and realized, oh my God, I should have been paying quarterly taxes, or I should have been buying more gear. And then all of a sudden they end up owing $4,000 or $5,000 at the end of the year. And they're going, I can't freelance. I can't afford to freelance because of my taxes. Get yourself a good tax accountant. I always say, get yourself a good banker, get yourself a good tax accountant, and talk to those people. Let them know what you're doing. If you can find people in the business, that's better, that know the business, that's better. But you got to approach it like a business. I co-authored a book years ago called The Business First, because my mentor in college used to say to me all the time, Randy, you're not going to succeed in this business unless you realize one thing: it's a business first, it's a creative outlet second. He used to say that's why they call it entertainment business. They don't call it entertainment, joy. And so that's it. So you got to really pay attention to taxes. Get yourself good at a tax attorney. Pay on taxes on time. Don't delay it. Learn what you can take off your taxes and what's important. I hired my tax attorney because he said to me, my job is to make sure that you can take off everything legally that you possibly can off your taxes to reduce your tax debt. And I was like, hired. That's it.
Well, so I'll be perfectly honest with everybody watching here. I'm probably not the best in general, in most of my career, I have been a good person to ask about this. I owed $30,000 in taxes this year, and I was not prepared for, in 2022, and I was not prepared for it at all. One of the things that you may probably have to your benefit is that, to lay this out as simply as possible, many production companies are going to want to hire you as a W-2. Now, essentially, that means that you're a full-time employee. Taxes are taken out. You'll look forward to getting a refund at the end of the year. But you've got to remember, you're not getting health care. These people are only employing you for 3 months, but the IRS has essentially told them, we want you to treat any employee that you're working 40 to 60 hours a week as a full-time employee, but you're not getting the benefits, right? So many production companies will want to hire you W-2 with taxes taken out. Now, if you work the majority of your work like that, guess what? You're going to file your taxes at the end of the year. You're going to get a refund, just like anybody who has a full-time job, who does come with benefits, who works for just one company all year round. Now, here's where it gets a little bit tricky and complicated is, even though I'm only getting employed by this one company for 3 months and they are paying me as a full-time employee, I'm still a freelancer at heart, right? Because when those 3 months are up, I've got to go find work, whether it be from them on another show or another company. And to be able to write off all your expenses, say you want to buy a lens or a drone, to be able to write those off legitimately, you need to set up an LLC. And typically for people in freelance, it's done as an LLC with an S Corp classification. And now that means that you want, in your perfect world, you want the employees to pay you 1099 without taxes taken out, which means you have to set aside 30 to 40% of every paycheck to pay for your taxes at the end of the calendar year.
Or do quarterlies.
And or quarterly, or however you want to do it. But you're only really supposed to be able to write off all the purchases you make, like your shoulder rigs and your drones and your lenses, if you're getting paid 1099 and you're like an LLC S Corp. So it's very tricky and very complicated. And you should always be, the biggest thing is to be supremely aware of, in any given year, oh, I'm going to work for 6 months out of this year with this company that's paying me as W-2, so I don't need to worry about setting aside money. But then if all of a sudden you hit so this is what happened to me. Last year, I hit a year where I almost got paid exclusively LLC 1099, no taxes taken out. I didn't set aside the money I should have set aside. And it came back to bite me this year because all of a sudden I owed a big chunk of money, which I didn't have, right? So this, you've got to be aware of it. And if you want to be able to write off all your investments, you do want those years where you get paid mostly as 1099 LLC without taxes taken out, because that is what legitimately, as far as the IRS is concerned, allows you to write down your profit margin with the purchases you've made, right? So it's a lot. And like I said, every company is different. You know, I can go to a company that's hiring me for a 3-month job and say, hey, I want you to pay me through my LLC. And guess what? They can say, no, we're not gonna. We're paying you W-2. That's how the IRS wants us to do it. We expect you to show up for 60 hours a week. And there's nothing I can say to that. I mean, I can turn the job down, but that's not, that certainly makes less economic sense. So it's a tricky industry tax-wise, and learn from my mistakes. Don't make the mistake I made. I've only made it once in this last year, but I did not do what I should have done, which is set aside 30% of every paycheck on those shows that I was getting paid without taxes taken out to pay my tax, what I owed tax-wise in this calendar year. So it's, you know, it's a lot to think about.
Yep, you get yourself a good tax attorney. You know, so many people get caught up into this. It's really tough, and so rely on your tax attorney. That's what you're paying him for. You know, that's it. But I can't tell you how many people that first start out when they're freelancing and all of a sudden get hit with these huge bills and go, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble. How do you control lighting for so we don't usually use storyboards in reality television. You know, maybe if you're doing opens. Somebody asked, can a drone license expire? Yes, you have to renew it. Do you still have to fill out a script when doing reality shows? Not really. Storyboards and scripts are usually just, you know, reality is reality. They have a pretty good idea. When we did Hogan's, their idea was we're going to follow these guys around for a couple weeks and see what happens. And we got a lot of shots of them washing cars and sitting around watching TV. And then by the end of the 4th season, it was like, stand here and say this, you know, stand here and say this. So there's a story arc. You gotta know what the story arc is, and you got to follow the story arc. How do you control lighting for reality TV? Also, where is action called? Or is it called yeah, you know, again, you know, you usually have scenes that you're doing, so you set that up. You want to talk about lighting a little bit, because lighting is a really, you know, one of those really interesting things on reality.
Yeah, sure. Let me just real quick, just so we don't miss anybody's question. Nathaniel Carroll asks if it's possible, I want to follow up. how do you prepare yourself to be in the proper position to capture emotion? So one of the big things you'll start to hear a lot as you're shooting reality, the producers, they want two eyes. They always want to see two eyes on yours. They don't want to, this is no good, right? They don't want to see that because now can you really see the emotion in my face, right? So how do you prepare yourself to be in the proper position? Well, as a reality camera, you're almost always moving. I mean, it's unless it's people sitting down eating a meal, you know, if the people in your scene are moving, you're moving. You're always moving. Your feet are never in it. So that's part of like, you're working the camera as you move, you're adjusting focus as you move, and you're trying to make those footsteps as minimal as possible on your shot. You want your shot to be good all the time. How do you prepare yourself? Well, the biggest thing about that is you're listening, right? You know when the scene is starting, the emotion of the scene is starting to come out, and then you're looking for those two eyes. You're looking to slowly start to push your lens in tighter and tighter as that more emotion comes out. How do you build the perspective skill? It's just experience. I mean, it's just you keep doing it, and yeah, you screw up, really. You screw up and you learn from your mistakes, and that's how you get better at it. You know, people will trust me. There'll be people to be there to tell you if you weren't in the right place at the right time. Randy, I'm sorry. Go back to the question you had last time. Make sure I didn't miss that one, because I thought that was a good one.
H photo. How did you learn?
Light. You wanted to ask about lighting. So lighting is tricky in reality. The good thing about cameras these days is we are getting dual ISOs, right? So there's less and less need for lighting. We're shooting with log a lot more, less and less need for lighting. A lot of that more that can be done in post. My general philosophy is around lighting is, again, I don't know. Say I have 4 people in a space and they're going to move in 5 different places in the same space over the course of an hour. And I have no idea what post is going to use at the end of the day. I have no idea where the emotion will break out. You don't know these things in reality. So when I light for reality, I am trying to manage contrast. I'm not trying to light for a specific moment, because I don't know when that moment will happen. What I'm trying to do is manage contrast. So, and what I mean by that is I look at the lights in an area, say we're indoors or outdoors, doesn't really matter where you are. I look at the lights that I can't control. I say, what are the lights that I have no control over? These are maybe the house lights, your practical lights. What are the lights that I cannot put a dimmer on, that I have no control over, right? And now, if I'm going to supplement light to an area, say I've got, most of our cast is going to be in this area. My main goal is to just have the light that I add to that area not to blend in seamlessly with the lights that I can't control. That's how I think about it in general, is I'm a contrast manager. I'm not an artist when it comes to lights, because I don't know where my cast is going to be when the moment that the producers want to put into the edit happens. I can't know that ahead of time. So my job is to light that area, and I don't want it, if there's some super bright lights in the background, my idea is to light that area to that level, so that when that moment finally happens, those super bright lights in the background aren't blown out and making my image look horrific, right? So I'm trying to balance the light level on where I think the majority of the action is going to happen with the lights that I can't control that are around. And I'm trying to minimize get them up high enough so that the camera operators who are shooting it, say it's a nighttime thing, aren't casting our shadows all over the talent. I'm trying to make it possibly as soft as possible, so as flattering as possible. But again, every scene, and that's all those philosophies are entirely different than, say, shooting an interview, which would be a very different mentality, because you know exactly where the person's going to be. They're going to be in that chair right in front of you, not moving for the next 3 hours, right? So it's very different mindsets depending on what you're shooting in reality. But for me, it's about contrast management. It says, how can I manage so that, you know, I don't want the scene to be bright and nothing else to show in the background. And I don't want the opposite. I don't want the very background to be super bright and my cast is not lit enough. So it's, how can I sort of even out, how can I minimize that dynamic range so that everything looks kind of good when the moment finally happens that they're going to want to use in the edit. That's my personal philosophy on it.
Yeah, we talk about dynamic range a lot in my class. If you haven't been through my class, it's one of the big things. I say there are two bullies on the playground that will kick your butt, take your lunch money if you don't pay attention to it. And most people don't, most beginning camera guys don't even think about dynamic range or contrast range. And it's very limiting. Standard dynamic range is about 7 to 8 stops on most cameras. S-Log is more like 14 to 16 stops. You know, the FX6 has a new hybrid gamma, which is about, 10 and a half stops. The human eye can see about 20 to 24 stops. So dynamic range is a big difference. And remember, every time you double your, add a stop of light, you double the amount of light. Every time you take away a stop of light, you decrease the amount of light. So the difference between seeing 21 stops of light with your eye and what the camera can see, even on a hybrid gamma, like 10 stops, is 10 times doubling the amount of light. So you can't put the camera into high contrast shooting situations and expect to have good looking lighting. Just not going to happen. It's physics. That's it. Brittany was asking, is it possible to do both video editing and filming as a career? Predator.
I'm just getting down to that. I know many people who do both. I mean, Horse Hardesty over at Spectrum. I mean, this is a prime example. And honestly, some of the people who do both are some of the best shooters you'll ever meet, because when you edit, you learn shooting infinitely faster. I mean, and Randy Schaefer is one of those guys who became a very good shooter because he was in news, where you had to shoot and then you had to go back to the studio, the news studio, and edit your own pieces. And that is not something I've ever done. And honestly, I'd probably be a better shooter if it had been, but I was beneficial enough to learn from people who espoused basically those sentiments. That yes, the key to doing kind of that thing, Brittany, is a lot of times is finding your way into a company that will let you do both, right? Or, but I don't want to even say that with any degree of certainty. I mean, there's a million paths. And so there's very well a possibility that you can be someone who is in post, but also in the field. You can be someone who's out there shooting, but also editing their footage or editing other people's footage. And you're only going to learn more by doing it.
So I got this to say about that. You have to understand shot sequencing and telling a visual story. So if you understand how to tell a visual story with shot sequencing and understanding what shots it takes to tell a story and how to change the camera angles and the focal length to do that, then you can be good at kind of both of that. One of the things that Gabe and I talked about before this started was that him and I have the same belief in that we don't do demo reels. It's kind of one of those silly things where anybody, when you do as much work as we do, first of all, it's a pain in the ass to do that many demo reels and keep it updated. And so, but anybody,
if you're doing that many demo reels, it means you're not working as much as you probably should be if you're really good. But Brian, your question, my elaboration is pretty simple. Is I could take my 10 best shots or my 30 best shots from the best shows I've shot and add in some drone, and you'd think I was the best camera operator on the planet, but that doesn't tell you anything about, can I go from single cam to 2 cam to 3 cam, back to single cam, back to 3 cam, back to by myself, and cross cover and properly cover that for an editor, no matter what. That a demo reel just doesn't tell that. It's great for if you're a feature filmmaker or a narrative filmmaker and you want to show your composition and your lighting. But again, I just told you, as far as lighting goes for reality, it's not about the beauty. It's not about being Roger Deakins. It's about putting yourself in the best position to have respectable, acceptable lighting for when the moment happens. And you don't know when that moment's going to happen. So you can't be like, oh, this is where I want these lights for when they say this dramatic line, and this is how I want this scene to feel. No, you don't, none of that you're going to know. until it happens in front of you. So your goal is to make sure when it does happen, you have enough light for there to be good exposure, and the lights in the background are, so that's the thing about why I don't believe personally in a reel, is I just don't think for reality shooters, it really tells you very much. I mean, it might tell you, you know, how to get some really nice shots, but like I've worked with plenty of reality shooters who had a great reel who didn't know a thing about shooting multicam or shooting single cam and how to transition from one to the other to the other. That's the art. That's the art of reality TV shooting, right? It's a completely different art than, you know, being Roger Deakins. So.
But when you're first starting out, that's hard to do, not have a demo reel, you know, it's a little bit tougher. When you get to, well, you know, doing as much work as we do, it's, you know, I say to people, just look at any of the shows on TV that I'm shooting right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And that's why, in general, a lot of your career and where it goes is, certainly in my case, was not really in my control. I mean, that's, unless you're looped in with, like, you know, your dad is Quentin Tarantino, like a lot of it's out of your control. You're going to get in with the company that you get in with and the people that you get in with, and they're going to be your demo reel. They're going to vouch for you and say, this guy deserves a shot. This guy would be a great chance to be, I think he'd be great as a third cam op. He's an AC now, but I think we should give him the chance to be a third cam op. And you're going to go ahead and do that. And you're going to learn how to be a third cam op. And one of the beauties of being a third cam op is that there's really, yeah, you can put them in the middle and say, hey, your responsibility is getting the wide, but you can't ever control what the people in front of you are doing. And when they break off and do something different, guess what? You might be a single cam op at that moment, because that might be what the scene dictates. So it's a great opportunity to learn a lot. You know, but I mean, I did have a demo reel early on, and it's nothing I would show any of you, because y'all probably got way better shots than I did on it on your own, you know, just from growing up with phones and all that stuff. I would be embarrassed to show it here. But it doesn't, but at the same time, I know that I can do what I can do at a high level, right? So that's why I don't really believe in it, because it's like, you know, my resume and my references sell me now, not any reel that I could ever put together, at least for reality TV.
Would you say you get a lot of jobs for by referral from people going, hey, you got to hire this guy, or, you know, this is, you know, you work on one job with a producer or a director, and then they
all of them. Yeah, I mean, all of them. I mean, Staff Me Up is, you know, you'd be negligent not to have an account on Staff Me Up at some point, you know, and maybe not for you guys yet, but like at some point there'll be a point where, given the nature of our business and the freelance nature of it, you'd be negligent not to have a profile and your resume and be keeping an eye on it. But no, I get basically all my work from references, referrals, recommendations. Even this, which I've referenced a couple times in the last hour, the Love During Lockup. This was a job that posted on Staff Me Up. It was in Naples, Florida. I'm in Florida. I'm local to Florida. It was with a company called Sharp Entertainment. So I submitted my application, and always do a cover letter, you know, always write a brief cover letter, why you'd be good, address anything that they had put in the job posting, but, you know, keep it short. But then I went to my connections, and I went to my phone, and I, you know, I'll even search my emails. Sharp. Do I have anybody that I've ever worked with that worked with Sharp? And I did. And I sent that. I waited 3 days because it was Christmas Day. And then this job posted, and I sent that person a text message on December 28th. And I said, hey, I applied for this job on Staff Me Up. I don't know if this is one of your shows or another supervising producer shows, but I'm available and in Florida if you need me, if you want to pass my info along. They did. I got the call. Boom. I got the work, right? I mean, all those Staff Me Up jobs have 10, 20, 30 other people applying, especially when times get slow, and they will from time to time. This is a really weird transitional time in reality TV right now. I feel like every network streamer in the business is pumping the brakes for the next 6 months and waiting to see where the dust settles before they greenlight new stuff. Like, you got to be willing to like exercise the connections that you have and reach out to the people you know and say, hey, like, I'm around, I'm available, and did this job, worked my butt off. The people love me. Now I'm in their queue right now. If, and I even follow back with the production manager. I said, hey, listen, it's a slow time for me. You can, dock my day rate $50 and I'll pay for my flight. And if you just get me a hotel room with the crew, I'll fly out to some of your other shoots. You might have to do that from time to time. You might have to put yourself up as a local in a city that you don't live in. I mean, and you can do that with Airbnb. You can do that with like, there's an app that is used predominantly by like traveling nurses to find places to stay. I do that.
Thank you, it's great, bro.
It's part of the business to have to take your lumps every once in a while and put yourself up as a local, because the production company can technically get locals. Like, if you can't work in Atlanta not as a local, there's enough people in Atlanta, they can find a local. If you want that job and you're not living in Atlanta, you're going to have to put yourself up as a local. And sometimes you just have to do that. And that's okay.
So that leads me to the question about why it's important to treat everybody in the crew great. The last story that you just told, the person that you called, can you tell us about who that person was that you called?
Oh yeah, sure. So, I mean, there's a great story. I mean, I started off at, as I mentioned earlier, this company called Pink Sneakers out of Orlando. I started as an intern, a PA, an assistant camera, and maybe I think by the time I was an assistant camera, this girl started as an intern at the same company named Amy Benesi, and we loved her. She was great. We knew right away the people who were above her, which I was by a significant margin, by a year or two worth of experience at that point. But like, when you see people who are wanted, right, and they're going to work for it and they're going to give it their all, like, you want those people to succeed and you believe in them. And so we helped her and we grew her, and she moved her way up to a different rank, which is the producer side, which is usually different than the tech side, right? But she became, first a PA, and then an associate producer, and then a segment producer, and then a field producer. And then she left Florida altogether, went to New York, worked her way up through the ranks, and is now like a lead producer executive at Sharp Entertainment. And that was my connection. So it came, the good things I did for her in the early part of my career, even when I was still young in my career, but like, I saw someone I believed in, you rub my back, I rub yours. It all works together. You want to treat people, you always want to be good to people, because you never know when they're going to take 5 leaps ahead of you without you even knowing it. But even when it's not people you don't like, you really want to boost the people you like, because the people you like are going to end up hiring you, or the people you like are at least going to end up referring you. And so that's a huge part of the game. And it is a game to some extent, I mean, you're playing against other people who want these jobs too. So you got to play, that's part of it. You got to play that game and
keep your contacts, get to know everybody.
Yeah. Stay in touch with people, and especially stay in touch with people when you're busy. That's the best time to stay in touch with people, I find. Reach out to people when you just booked yourself on a 3-month show, right? That's a great time to reach out. It's like, hey, because
busy for the next 3 months, but
yeah, there's nothing attractive about the air of desperation, right? So you want to reach out to people when you're busy, I think, and then you're going to reach out to again when you're slow, but like, it's always good to reach out to them when you got stuff going on, because that makes it seem like you're sought after and valued and wanted. And as an operator, if you only reach out to people when you're slow, that, it's just,
So Nathan has an interesting question. He's doing some internship hours, and he's working with a Canon C200 with a 7200 millimeter lens with the director who's giving him shots. He's wanting to know, how do you recommend angles to the omnipresent voice? How do you, in the business, we call it selling a shot. So if you're doing, you got coverage, but you see an interesting shot and you want to sell it to the director, you can talk to the director over the headphones, you can talk to the director beforehand, or you can, show him the shot. If he doesn't like it, he'll say, change the shot, or that's a good shot, hold it. And so I'm constantly selling shots when I'm shooting, especially if I have a director directing me, I'm saying, look at this shot, check this shot out, but it depends on, every director is different. So you got to, it's all about communication, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't ever, you can't take it personally. Everybody's got a different taste. Even here's the other thing is like, what the shot that you see, the shot that you frame, it might be perfect for a different type of show, but it's not perfect for this type of show. It's not conveying the sense. Doesn't mean it's not a great shot. You could still have a great shot with your 70-200. It's just not for that particular show. It's not communicating what that particular director wants, or it's just not there. It could just not be their style too. It doesn't even mean it's not a great shot. Even if it's right, they could be wrong. So, keep playing and learning and trying new things. And it sounds like it went well for you on that shoot. So that's great. But just don't, I guess there's not a whole lot I can say on that question besides don't take it personally if they don't like it. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody has different tastes. Everybody has a different way they like it done. I mean, there's shows I've been on recently where I framed up a shot and the director wanted me to frame a shot that I would never personally shoot. Right. But it doesn't matter. That's fine. I'm not there to just do it the way I want to do it. They're the director. Right. So I do it the way they want me to do it. And I do my best to get to that shot that they want as quickly as possible, even though it's not something I would ever frame personally. But that's
I have to revert back to Jimmy Van Winkle quote. I'll tell you how to do it right, but I'll do it in the screwed up way you want me to.
Yeah. Sometimes you're going to have a director who's got a weird sense of like symmetry and angles, and you're just going to have to like suck it up and be like, swallow your pride and be like, I would never deliver that to an editor, but that's what they asked for. And that's part of it. It's okay.
So Richard,
wants to get hired back, you're going to have to do it. So just think about it that way. If you want to keep making money from a company, then if you're going to want to stand on the high moral ground, then you're more than welcome to do that too. And you won't get another shot at the cash. So that's,
So Richard wants to know, are you ever going to get away from reality and do features or movies?
No, because I'm still terrified of failure. And, I don't think there's nothing that scares me more than, shooting and directing a low budget movie that is horrible and is, I know what I'm good at now, and I'm content doing that. I mean, if I had less fear, sure, but I'm still very hard on myself, and probably not is the honest answer. In a better version of myself, the better answer would be, sure, I'd love to go back to what I thought I would do when I was in college, which when I wrote a script and thought I would direct my own, movie and stuff. But I'm very happy in what I do, very confident in what I do. Yeah. And yeah.
I can tell you this, after 45 years of doing this, I'm still waiting for the day where I finish product and go, that's perfect. I wouldn't change a thing,
Yeah.
When that day happens, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the part of the answer, Richard, to the honest answer to your question is like, if I wanted to do a feature or a movie and get paid, I'd have to start back at the bottom. Right. And so when you get to my age in life, unfortunately, you have significant financial obligations, as everybody will find. The more money you make, the more money you spend, right? So it'd be very tough for me to get hired to do any of those jobs without any experience in features or movies, right? So, but I need to keep making money because I got bills to pay, right? So that kind of keeps me locked in, and I'm fine with that. I don't have any regrets about the way my career went. Like I honestly think I would be bored to shit on features. I think it'd be way too slow moving for me. I don't like that aspect of features where it's like everybody's in their own department. Nope. The camera doesn't touch the lighting gear. The lighting doesn't touch the camera gear. Like I love the you know, the way everybody works together in reality. Everybody chips in. If you're the DP, you're also a PA, and Randy's probably said this to you. If you're a PA, you know what I mean? You get to contribute so much more, and you get to be, it's so much more a collaborative effort. And I realize that film is a very collaborative effort, so I don't want to say it like that, but you know, there's no shortage of things you're never going to find yourself just sitting around waiting on a reality TV set. If you're an assistant camera, you could be waiting for the lighting department for 3 hours to get the next shot set, right? That's never going to happen in reality TV. You know, you can always find something to do, even if it's below you. And if you can do it and it's below you, people love you even more. So there's that.
We like to say that everybody's a PA on a shoot. You know,
Yeah.
I always say that on my shoot. Everybody's a PA on the shoot. My dad used to say to me all the time, if you want to be successful, make yourself useful. And if you don't know about the PA Pocket Handbook, you should download that for free. It's free. It gives you all the stuff you need to know about working on a set. Somebody was asking about using IMDb. Do you use that a lot, Gabe?
So yeah, Deborah, I'll real quick, how many shows have you filmed? We kind of did that one already.
Deborah's gone.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, how is IMDb? Not essential at all. I don't even touch it. No, I never used it. I use Staff Me Up. That's what you use in reality. IMDb is for feature people. That's not me. I don't even know what would be on my IMDb. I mean, I'm sure I have an IMDb.
You have an IMDb, but you know, it's like
me.
I
don't update it. I don't know what's on it. I just don't know.
What's been your proudest work, and where can we watch it?
Well, I think my proudest work is probably coming up, and that's going to be the brand new series for HGTV called Renovation Wild. It's about a husband and wife team renovating their safari camps in the lower Zambezi National Park in Africa. It'll probably come out mid this year. I was the B cam, but also the drone DP on that, and the DP on one of the episodes. And I spent 5 months in Southern Africa last year shooting the show. And it was incredible. Loved every second of it. And I can't wait to see it hit the air. And it's not something, I don't watch reality TV really. I watch scripted for the most part. I don't really have much interest in watching reality TV, but this is a show I'm super excited to see hit the air. And right behind that would be the Secrets of the Zoo show. I've worked a bunch of the Secrets of the Zoo shows for Disney Plus and Nat Geo Wild, and those are just super fun shows to shoot because you work with so many different cast members. There's so many shows you work on where it's the same cast every day, right? And 2 months in, they're sick of you, you're sick of them. With the zoo shows, you're working with 100 different zookeepers and then a much smaller staff of vets, but you're spread out. So and then you're working with animals, and they don't talk back and they don't give you grief, and they're super interesting, and it's a super interesting field. But yeah, this new Renovation Wild on HGTV is going to be probably the thing I'm most proud of and most excited to actually see hit the airwaves and see how it does, and know that honestly, a giant majority of the shots that are going to hit the airwaves were at my hands. And that's something you can be proud of. I mean, when I see all the drone work and all the cool drone shots, and I worked the long lens for the majority of the show. And I know that's and I did a lot of the before and afters for how these, how this lodging looked before and after. My fingerprints are going to be all over that show, and that's a really fun feeling when you get to see, that level of, oh my God, this episode was 60% shots that I took and created and visualized and made happen. It's fun. It's a cool feeling.
So let me ask you questions and that up here that you might be able to answer, and I'll help you go through this. There's a handful of production companies out there that do most of the reality shows. I mean, we're talking about, Pie Town and LMNO and, High Noon and places like Pink Seekers and what's Spectrum's new name, Remedy or something, Remedy TV.
Yeah, Remedy.
Yeah. So, can you name any other production companies that that do a lot of reality work?
I mean, yeah. I mean, there's more than you think, I think, is the answer to that question. There's your really big players. High Noon would be one of them. There a bunch are gonna slip my mind. I mean, I do think Sharp. I mean,
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
I'd have to look through my emails. I mean, there've been, and they come and they go and they change names. My personal perspective is the smaller the reality company you can get in with, the better it is, because you can get to intimately know the people who run the company better. The bigger they get, the more corporate they are. And just like anything, you're disconnected. They don't see you as anything more than a number on a paycheck. And you're going to have to work for those companies for sure. But the more, the smaller the reality production companies you can get with, the more in you can get, the more you can actually get to know the people who run them. That's my personal advice. I've got a lot of, personal benefit, and, it's just most of the companies I work for, I don't get to know the CEOs and the owners, but some of the smaller ones I do. And that's can be a great benefit to your career, especially if you get to know them well and they believe in you and they trust you. That's really trust is what you work off of. Trust is your stock and trade in this business. Is, people will pay for your flights if they trust you, right? They won't pay for your flight. If they never heard of you, they'll find a local because they don't know you, right? But if they trust you, if they've seen your work and they trust you, then they'll put up the extra $500 to get you to send you back and forth from one spot to another.
Deborah, you got your hand raised. You got a question?
Hi, Deborah.
Hi. So you were talking about outlets that do reality TV shows, and I was like, TLC. I mean, Tarzan and it's on TLC, and then you got Serious Address on TLC, and then you got Food Network, like all those.
Yeah, so the networks, so what you're asking basically is the networks hire production companies. So the networks don't really do the shows themselves. Some of them, like Nat Geo has its own production arm as well. But for the most part, they hire external production companies to come in and do the shows.
Right. So the best way to think about it is just as I am a freelancer to a production company, a production company is a freelancer to a network or a streaming service or a cable station. So it's almost like a 2-level thing, is that production companies by and large are freelance too. They're all out there fighting each other to try to sell shows. And then once those shows are sold, we, one step below, the camera operators, the audio guys, the producers are all out there fighting each other to try to get hired on the shows that they've sold. So it's 2 levels of freelancer almost. Angel, no props. I don't have any advice on props. I've never handled weapons. If there's weapons on set, there's typically a safety person there. We would never, as a cam op, I'd never be handling them. And props in general are just they're a very small percentage of reality shows that would ever even have a props department or props in general.
Yeah. Anytime you're using a handgun or any kind of weapon, you need a weapon specialist, especially here at Full Sail. So somebody was asking, it's if you're doing feature films, you got to get pigeonholed into a specific department. When you're doing reality shows, it's a little bit more,
looser.
Looser.
I know you can make the transitions way easier. I know audio guys who've been camera guys who've become audio guys. There's a lot more leeway to learn on the job and not get stuck in one department and rising through the ranks of that department. But listen, feature films are the brass ring, right? So I don't know if no one anymore, but certainly back in 2004 or 1999 to 2004, when I was going to college, like, the goal was always to work in feature films now I suppose you could be, and I think that's what most people probably want in the beginning. But like, if you come from the means I came from, or you don't come from money, you're just happy to not work in retail. So you'll take any path you can get. Right. And so mine led me to reality. And in hindsight, I'm actually really happy it did. Right. But, if you're dead set on feature films, don't give that up. Go to LA.
Go to Atlanta, go to New Mexico, go to
work at a rental house, everybody has a different story about how they got into the business. You're going to have to fight harder because those jobs are, predominantly passed down from people's fathers to their kids, right? The good grips raise their children and they become, so it's tough. It's harder to break in, right? Because those are the, if you want to work on Avatar or the new Top Gun, like there's probably not a whole lot of people who are working on who came into the business without some sort of connection. So
yeah, on an average feature film, on a high budget feature film, it's 250 to 500 people. On a reality show, it's usually about, anywhere from 10 to 25 people, not the big difference, but the number of motion pictures that are shot every year in the United States is a fraction of the reality shows that are shot in the United States every year. Tyler has a question about Milanote. I've used Milanote before. I use primarily Studio Binder, and the big thing I've been using a lot lately is Frame.io. So
oh my God, Studio Binder, yes. And got a whole YouTube channel I've been looking at. Gotta watch this
Milanote, I've never even heard of, Randy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tyler.
Yeah. Okay, Edward, you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah, so how hard is it to alternate from working in the feature films and the reality TV or the reality shows? Can you work in both?
I don't.
Randy, that's probably a question better for you than for me.
No, I know some lighting guys who go back and forth, and some audio guys, but camera guys usually don't do that. There are different types of cameras. Primarily, when you're working on features, you're using Reds and Alexas, or you're shooting film with a Arri or Panavision camera. That's a whole different ball game. Audio is pretty much the same, and again, there's whole different job categories, DITs and things like that. You have a media manager on a reality show, you have a DIT on a feature film. So you don't really see a whole lot of crossover on that, except if you're doing lighting. But again, you don't see many grip trucks out on, reality show sets. Just not going to happen.
Rarely ever.
Or the time.
Yeah, rarely ever.
Okay, so any more questions? We're going to wrap this up here. We've been going for 2 hours. We usually go for an hour, but yeah, I heard Mr. DiCaprio likes to bring interns in for production company. Yeah, we shot the Right Stuff, which was DiCaprio's production company at Full Sail last year. We rented out a couple of the stages to him, and they used a lot of students, so they like using interns and students. And if you look around, there's a lot of internship jobs, and it's just a matter of going out there and networking and getting to know the right people, and then being willing to, as you're starting out, to volunteer and do work for free for a while. That doesn't mean that you got to be careful about indentured servitude, where people are just wanting to take advantage of you and hire you. But I always recommend people, if you got free time and you want to get in the industry, volunteer.
Nathaniel, real quick, I'll answer your question. Not from like features, no, because it's a whole different ball game. But like, this is kind of an example, I think, of like what I really like, what I see in a completely different field of camera work than I do, is that, like, for example, I'm a basketball fan. I watch a lot of basketball, and basketball is a live event, right? Essentially, you're shooting reality. And one of the things I love in a basketball game is when a camera guy shoots a player who shoots a shot, the shot goes in, they go back to the player, and then as the player walks back, they're that aware of some fans in the stadium who are going nuts, that instead of sticking with the player, they rack focus to that reaction. And that's kind of like sums up reality, because reality is both what's happening and then the people's reaction to what's happening. That's always, you always have to have that in your mind. It's not just the big thing that's happening over here. It's the editor needs that reaction too. And if all your camera guys just go to shoot the thing that's happening, your editor's screwed, because they don't have the reactions that they need to tell the story, right? And so I love that in a basketball game, when someone shoots a really insane shot, the crowd is going nuts, and they let the player walk out of frame because they see that person in the background, and they rack focus to that fan who's having the most ridiculous reaction ever. And so that's a prime example of like, I love it when I watch a basketball game and I see a cameraman make that move, because to me, that's like, they're in tune with the moment. They're in tune with that story of what's happening, because it's not just about the great player making the shot. It's about all these other people and the energy in the building, and the fact that they're aware enough of everything that's going on to acknowledge that that's part of the story they're telling. It's not just the game, it's the people who are watching the game. So there's an example for you.
So one last question here about rates. You want to kind of, how do you tell about rates, and how do you know if you're being underpaid? And before we get into that, Edward, you got to reach out to your instructor. Not every instructor will give you GPS points, but if you reach out to your instructor, some like Jen Miller will. So that's it. So let's talk about rates, and this will be the last question here.
Yeah, sure. Gurneys. Well, I mean, to be honest, I got underpaid for probably the first 5, 6, 7 years of my career. I was getting probably severely underpaid, and I had no idea. And I was just happy to be not working in retail and making what to me was decent money, which was like $100 a day for 14-hour days at the time. But that was still more than a retail, and I was still doing something I liked. You will start to learn. You'll talk to people who are doing similar jobs. You'll have your mentors who will tell you. But you'll start to get a pretty good sense of what the rates are for a camera operator, for a director of photography, for a sound guy. And these are very different rates in reality than they are in feature films. Reality is a very low budget medium. Those rates are going to be significantly less. Doesn't mean they're not living wages. But you just start to, you learn, and a good place to start is just look, if you just look on Staff Me Up. I mean, most of those are going to be at the lower end of the rate spectrum, but you just start looking at that every day. You're going to start to see what a segment producer can expect to make a week, what a director of photography can expect to make a day. So just that information is out there, and you can find it and start to just be aware of it. And part of getting your resume built is probably being underpaid. Sadly, I wish there was another way around it, but like, guess what? I got underpaid for 5, 6 years, and I got to where I am now. And it's probably because I was willing to be underpaid. I didn't know I was underpaid at the time, but it helped my career. And so you don't want to devalue the position and the rates. But you also need to get experience so that you can build a portfolio and a resume and get hired for the right rates and the real rates or the best rates. And then when you get to a point in your career, you're going to know what you're worth, and you're not going to, you're going to say, I won't work below this rate or whatever. But I negotiate rates all the time, and that's based on the company, based on my sense of the company, whether I think they're a cheap company, a not cheap company. If I see a bunch of red flags, I will not negotiate. If I see them reaching out in certain ways, I'll be happy to negotiate. If a job is going to send me halfway across the world, I'll work for less. So rates it's a bargaining thing, and then it's a malleable thing. So
that's just it. You got to be flexible. You can't say this is my rate. A lot of people do that, but
I don't have a rate.
I have a red flag rule, 3 red flag rule. If there are 3 red flags that go off, I usually turn down the job, and that served me well. And a lot of times people say, well, why are you turning down the job? Because a lot of people aren't used to people going, nah, you hit my 3 red flags, I'm turning down. And they always say, well, what do you mean 3 red flags? And I tell them, I got a 3 red flag rule, and you just hit 3 of them. So I'm turning down the job. They're like, well, wait, what's the red flags? Those are negotiable, So it's a conversation, communicate.
Yeah, don't be afraid to walk away if it's just, if it's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth, it's not usually worth it. I mean, there's red flags, and you'll learn them pretty quick, but Yeah.
So again, we're going on 2 hours. Gabe, I appreciate you being so generous with your time.
Oh yeah. This was a blast, Ron. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's great having you on here. It's such an educational thing for people to be able to hear somebody like you, talk about the industry. So again, I'm really appreciative of you coming on here and doing this, and I can't thank you enough. And it's good to see your parents. Thanks for
Hi,
showing up.
Mom. Hi, Dad.
Yeah, so it's great again, and I'll have this available up online for you for the students here at Full Sail here in about a week, and once it goes up online, I'll send you the link so that you guys can see it as well, Gabe. But again, thanks for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, anybody, just don't hesitate to reach out to me. But thanks again, Gabe. Great to see you.
And feel free, guys, if you have questions for me, feel free to reach out to Randy. He can pass them along. I'm more than happy to answer. And thank you for your time. And I hope I could provide a little something to, make this night and your time worth your while. So thank you.
I have to tell you that, I could sit and talk to Gabe for hours and hours and hours. We have stories upon stories upon stories that would be
Well, we
entertaining.
just did 2 hours and it felt like 15 minutes. So that's clearly true. But yeah, Randy, thank you so much. And
Great.
guys,
Thanks,
thanks so much for coming and watching. I appreciate it.
Have a good evening,
Bye,
everybody.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.